Conversely, let's take a look at a thesis statement that would be more so in the right direction. The Veterans Administration should be exempt from budget cuts in order to serve veterans of the Iraq War. Now, that's not quite where we need to be because it's still a little bit broad. We're still missing the how that's going to be really analyzed, but at least it does tell us something. It's arguable. You can take many different viewpoints or you can analyze it from different perspectives. And because of that, it can be a claim or a thesis. It's multifaceted and it's dynamic. It's not just a factual piece of information. The idea here is that through our content, through our main points, through our subpoints A, B, and C, and those subpoints thereof, we are providing the reasoning, we are providing the logic, we are providing the evidence that's backing up this claim, which is the thesis statement. Now, just to show you, I'm going to back out of here. In this particular statement, how can we make this better? How do we really encapsulate what it is we're going to be talking about in our essay through this statement? Well, we've got the subject, right? We've got some kind of perspective about the subject. We know that this is going to be discussing that the Veteran Administration should be exempt from budget cuts to better serve veterans of the Iraq War. But how? How is that being analyzed? How is that being discussed? How is this statement going to provide a skeleton or some type of framework for the essay or the content that's coming? The idea is that it can be more organized because this could be more narrow or more specific. The Veterans Administration should be exempt from budget cuts by blank, blank, and blank in order to serve veterans of the Iraq War, wherein the three blanks here can be the methods by which the Veterans Administration can be exempt from budget cuts. So that's taken the perspective of analyzing it through what are the three ways or what are three main ways that the VA can be exempt from budget cuts. You can do this another way. The Veterans Administration should be exempt from budget cuts in order to serve veterans of the Iraq, to better serve veterans of the Iraq War by blank, blank, and blank. So in this instance, we're making this thesis statement more specific by talking about the specific ways by which veterans can be better served through budget cuts. Or being exempt from budget cuts, rather. And the three blanks, I hope you see, is congruent or are congruent with the three main topics or the three main areas or ideas of the classical essay model. Finally, I want to make the point that just as your entire essay has a topic sentence that is anchored or is the focus and gives it control, your individual paragraphs must also have a thesis statement, and that is what we call your topic sentences. Every paragraph should have a topic sentence that tells us exactly what you're going to be discussing and how in that particular paragraph. Paragraph in itself is a microcosm of the overall essay. You have a topic sentence that's going to mimic a thesis statement for the overall essay, but for the purposes of that particular paragraph. You'll then have content, 2 to 3 sentences of your supporting details, your explanation, and then your conclusion that oftentimes segues into the next paragraph or to the next idea in the sequence of ideas you're presenting. And so when you're writing an essay, it's crucial that you connect each paragraph back to your purpose and to your overall thesis statement. This is a way to keep your writing organized and to make sure everything flows and to make sure that you are transitioning adequately between your ideas. There's one other slide here that I want to show you. The thesis test. How can you test a thesis statement to determine whether or not it is sufficient enough, covers all of the elements that need to be covered, but is also effective? The first step is, do I answer the question? or throughout my content, all of my subpoints, all of my sentences, all of my paragraphs and sections of my essay, am I hitting at the heart of the subject I'm getting across in my thesis statement? Am I answering the question? Am I resolving the concern? Am I analyzing to the extent that I need to analyze? The second is my thesis statement specific enough? Just like in the second example I just showed, we were able to take a thesis statement that was a thesis statement because it was dynamic and arguable. It's a claim, but it didn't exactly tell us how that information was going to be dissected or analyzed. And so we looked at two different ways that you could do that or make that thesis statement more specific. Then you can ask, does my thesis pass the so what test? This is very important because this addresses the issue of relevance. Is it something that anybody would care about? Moreover, if you look at the three overarching elements, purpose, audience, and context, you have to address your audience. Is this going to be something that my audience cares about, and why? That's the so what test. What implications does it have on our audience and their real life and their experience? Does my essay support my thesis specifically and without wandering? In other words, are all of the supporting paragraphs and sentences within those paragraphs in pursuit of making the point that is my purpose? Are they all congruent with and supporting and reinforcing my thesis statement in some way? Have any wandering ideas been eliminated or tweaked to make them relevant for the purpose of my thesis? Finally, does my thesis pass the how and why test? And that's telling us exactly the three areas or the three components you're discussing or the three ideas you're discussing and why that's important or how that's relevant to the subject of your paper or essay. This is an important, useful list to keep together. Let me show you one that I consider to be a good thesis statement. I have here the beginning of an essay. This would be the Church of Scientology essay. We're starting with the introduction. Again, remember that in the introduction, we need to have all of the relevant details that provide the reader with a general understanding of that macro level of analysis. What is the general understanding of the situation at hand? And so here we have someone who has written, Church of Scientology is an organization that classifies itself as a church, encouraging violent behavior, wherein people are defrauded of their life savings in order to be a legitimate part of the organization. The Church of Scientology was granted tax-exempt status in 1993. However, there have been myriad attempts to revoke the exemption based on various illegal activities stemming from many facets of the organizational structure. This is something I would say is a good introduction for an essay like this. We've got some of the basic points. We've got the contention. We've got that the tax-exempt status has been attempted to be revoked due to illegal activity. We have a year to provide some scope or some timing and some frame of reference for the reader as to when the Church of Scientology was granted tax-exempt status. It's a good generalized opening and a good generalized outline of ideas for the reader to understand what's to come. Now, there are some issues with this that we'll discuss later. For instance, it's clear that you can pick up on a bias or a perspective or an idea or opinion imbued into this regarding the Church of Scientology in some way. But we'll discuss that at another point. The idea now is to get your ideas on paper in an organized fashion. And so I would say that that's a sufficient introduction here. The highlighted is a thesis statement. The following analysis will dissect the dilemma of the Church of Scientology's tax-exempt status by discussing implications of minimum cost requirements required of organizational members, the coercive and extortive nature of organizational leaders, and leniency by the government to allow the church to continue operating under this classification while consistently ensuring the humanity of organizational members. As you can tell, this is an extremely specific thesis statement. It tells us exactly what's going to happen. The following analysis will dissect or analyze the dilemma of the Church of Scientology's tax-exempt status, That's clearly the subject of that thesis statement. That's the anchor. That's the heart. That's the topic. That's the prompt. That's everything that we're going to be discussing. But we're going to be discussing that in a certain way, by a certain perspective. So by reading this and by reading the introduction, clearly the perspective here is that the Church of Scientology should not retain its tax-exempt status. That's the why of the subject, right? And then these are the three areas that will be discussed. Area number one, or main point A, implication. By discussing implications, minimum cost requirements required of organizational members. So that's talking about how much the organization charges people to be a part of the organization, even at a base level. But to continue being a part of that organization, as you conduct more research, you'll find it costs millions and millions of dollars. So this person is taking a look at the financial burden or the financial aspect, and maybe some of the illegal financial practices as part of that structure and organizational structure. That's main point one. Main point two, the coercive and extortive nature of organizational leaders. This is talking about some of the idolized members. You'll find out who they are when you do more research if you follow this prompt. But looking at how coercive and how extortive those organizational leaders are to other leaders in the organization, but also to all other members of the organization, and how the extortion of the members of the organization is also illegal. And there have been many instances of illegal activities documented. And it also has a fiduciary element to it as well, being coercive and extortive in terms of continuing to force people into certain positions in the organization, or to continue in the organization by threatening them in some kind of way. And then finally, leniency by the government to allow the church to continue operating under this classification while ensuring the humanity of organizational members. In this thesis statement, we have everything we need to know. We have explicit detail, we have the direction of the analysis, we have the subject of the analysis, and it's a great way to end an introduction section for an essay such as this. It tells us everything we need to know. And then all following paragraphs, all following sections will clearly be collapsed under one of these main ideas in some way. Now, it's also important to develop your thesis statement in the same order that you're going to outline your ideas. So you want to make sure that your very first idea is going to be main point A, and that main point A is the first one that follows, second B, third C, right? Everything has a very intuitive structure and a logical structure. But this is a thesis statement that I would definitely say is academic in nature. And this is the level of specificity that we really want to start aiming for when we can. So, as you are preparing for this essay and you're looking through your contextual list and figuring out what it is you want to say and how you want to approach these ideas, this is an example of how you can do that. I want you all to try to work on your own contextual list, and I want you to try to develop a thesis statement that says what it is you want to say. And then if you have questions, let me know. Come see me. I will take a look at your thesis statement, and I'll provide some more examples so you have another reference point. But this is somewhat of the level we're looking for. It doesn't have to be this fancy, but this is a very strong academic tone. This is a very strong thesis statement, and this is an explicit thesis statement. So it's something that you should be aiming for. If nothing else, this is a good idea or a good example of an introduction that would work well for an essay of 3 pages or so. With that, I have rambled on for well over an hour. I am going to end the videos. Make sure that you take a look at in-class writing. Let me pull this back up. In-class writing 8 and 9. In-class writing 9 is just asking you to look at the feedback on your previous assignments and to submit your academic tone inventory. I just want to take a look at what you've been tracking in your writing. There is a reading assignment. I'm going to post that at the bottom of the page under the videos. So just make sure you do those 2 in-class writing assignments and read the reading assignment. Other than that, we're going to be gearing up for drafting and finishing the first contextual essay.